Hello ladies and gentlemen, it's Rei-Lin bringing you another premium tank review. This time it's going to be the Tier 6 Rapid Deployment Force Light Tank, or the RDF LT. This is a premium tank that you cannot buy in the game, but if we go into buying some gold, you click on this collector edition, you can buy it for $40 using Operation Lightning. The collector edition comes with this tank, 60 days of premium, 3 million credits, 3,250 gold, and a 25% bonus to credits and reputation gain for 1 week. You also get an achievement called Lightning. It's going to run you 40 bucks, however. Well, let's just talk about this tank at first, and then we'll decide whether or not I think this thing is worth it. And if you don't want to listen to me prattle on about the stats on this thing, you can click up at the top of your screen here. Should be popping up just a moment. And that'll take you straight to the replay so that you can have a little fun and watch this thing tear the battlefield apart with its rapid firing gun. You can see the tank is actually kind of small. The patch is in where we have some camo now, and I've already camoed this thing up. It is a light tank, and it lives or dies by its camouflage, which is pretty good. So let's dive in to the details. Damage. Now keep in mind again that I do have some retrofits on here, and so my statistics on this tank are going to be reflected with that, but the damage per shot is 320. For a light tank, that's not too bad. Honestly, at Tier 6, 300 plus is pretty good for any tank. The penetration is 275 millimeters. Since this is Tier 6 and above, I don't take as much heat, but if you look here, the damage at 285 with 275 millimeters of penetration, and the heat actually has 308 damage with 242 millimeters of penetration. But since this is Tier 6 and up, I generally don't take as much heat as I do armor piercing, simply because there's a lot more tanks out there at Tier 6 and up that have ERA armor that will be rendering most of my heat shells ineffective. So damage penetration, pretty good for a light tank. Damage per minute, 5,898. That is extremely good. It's not quite as good as a couple of other tanks for this tier, but on average, that is really good DPM for this tier and for a light tank. Health, pretty healthy at 1,540. Again, that's kind of average. There's other Tier 6s, say like the T-72 here. You could look and it's got 1,700. So, I mean, it's only a couple hundred shy of a main battle tank. That's not too bad. But here, of course, it being a light tank is where it falls flat on its face, and that's definitely the armor, 16, 16, and 10. And the turret at 14, 12, and 12, this thing isn't bouncing anything. Even a Tier 4 autocannon will rip this thing to shreds. So you have to be very careful, as you must with most light tanks, and not getting shot at. However, it does have some mobility at nearly 65 kilometers an hour top speed. It only takes 3.9 seconds to get from 0 to 32 kilometers an hour. Pretty healthy on that. I'm going to say right now, however, that like most of the premium tanks, it seems like their hull traverse speed is just garbage. And this tank, on top of that, seems to have really bad ground resistance. It seems to just be a little bit sluggish for a light tank, especially if we compare it to the other Tier 6 light tank, the VFM Mark V. This thing gets around. It's not bad, but it definitely just doesn't feel, as maneuverable as I think it should anyway. The camouflage value, and keep in mind I do have some camo paint on this tank, so these values are increased from its base. Now it is at 0.3325. That is not bad at all across any terrain. Its view range is 425, which is okay for a light tank. There's a couple of other light tanks and AFVs out there that is going to beat this on the view range. But here, when we get to talking about the gun, is where there's some smiles on your face. 10 degrees of gun depression. Now, you can tell just by looking at this tank that it is extremely small. And if we flick over here to the other light tank, the VFM, you can see that it's actually fairly giant compared to this thing. I mean, it sits up, the VFM sits up pretty high. This is really low profile, and it still has 10 degrees of gun depression, which is pretty amazing. It actually gets 3 degrees over the ass end of the tank, which, if you're running away and want to take a couple pot shots, at least you have a little bit of gun depression to work with. Turret traverse is average. It's a little on the slow side at 39.4 degrees per second. It's not going to make or break the tank. However, you have to keep in mind, like I said, that the whole traverse on this is pretty slow. That combined with a slow turret traverse means that it's going to be really hard to stay on targets that are fast moving in front of your field of vision unless you're turning both the hull and the turret at the same time. You're not going to keep up with any fast moving targets whatsoever using one or the other. You have to use them both. The reload time, extremely fast. For the damage this thing is doing per shot, 3.26 seconds is amazing. That's why the DPM is so high, is because the reload is so low. And that is why this thing becomes just a little tiny. It's almost like the light tank equivalent of the E-25 from World of Tanks. This thing is just a machine gun when it comes to rapidly shooting at the enemies. And at .07 accuracy, it's going to hit almost every shot it fires, even from long range. And a targeting time of 1.6 seconds, you combine that with the excellent gun depression of 10 degrees, you're barely going to have to ever expose much more than just the front of your turret at any time. And because of the really bad armor, you're going to really have to do that. But it doesn't have to stay vulnerable very long because of the fast aim time and the awesome gun depression. This thing is one hell of a flanking light tank. Now, it's definitely more scouty just because, like I said, you see it has no armor, even against autocannons. This thing's going to get destroyed if it gets caught out in the open. It also doesn't get any smoke grenades, with something that the VFM5 does in fact get. It doesn't get anything other than a speed boost, and that's on a 1 minute cooldown. But it does have sluggish mobility, so it seems to me like this is a tank where you want to rush it into a bush or somewhere far on the flanks of the enemy and then sit there and camp, spot with your pretty good view range, and sit still and wait until enemy tanks get past you and just light them up with your amazing DPM. This is not going to be a brawling tank. You don't want to be taking this into any kind of close quarters because you just don't have the turret traverse or the hull traverse to really circle around any tank whatsoever. And if the tank you're circling has any kind of speed, you're only going to be able to take a few hits. 1500 health is not bad, but that's easily 3 or 4 shots and you're done. And this thing just does not have quite the maneuverability or the speed to get out of dodge. And with no real defense like a smoke grenade to at least buy it a little bit of time, you're pretty much dead if you get spotted. But that is not that big of a deal. Like I said, this can play more as a sniper tank, and I would definitely use the speed to get it somewhere where you're going to be in a position to shoot at the sides and the flanks of enemy tanks and just camp out in a bush, almost tank destroyer-ish, and then move in when they've been weakened and finish them off with your rapid-firing, high DPM gun. And that is the statistics on this thing. Real quick, though, just for complete sake, let's compare it to the VFM Mark V, which you can, in fact, get. Actually, let's compare it to the other one, my normal one, where the crews are roughly equal. And you can see that 320 versus 364 on the damage, but the rate of fire is much higher on the RDF compared to the VFM. The penetration is slightly higher on the VFM, but the damage per minute is significantly higher, almost 2,500 more. The VFM has more health. It definitely has more armor. The VFM is more of a haul-down monster, at least against autocannons, and it can be kind of trollish when it comes to the turret and the hull armor. So it does have a little more armor to work with. It's a little bit faster. It gets 0 to 32 1 second faster than the RDF. Its camouflage isn't quite as good. The view range is exactly the same. The cannon depression is exactly the same over the front. The rear loses 1 degree. Not that big a deal. But you see the turret traverse is significantly better than the RDF. But the reload time, the RDF wins. Accuracy, RDF really wins. And aim time, definitely the RDF. So it's basically you're giving up a little gun handling on the VFM for a little bit more armor and 300 or so more health and just a little bit more penetration. So overall, I don't think that the RDF is a bad tank. Do I think it's worth the $40? Honestly, if you need the credits, if you need the gold, sure. If you're not into that or you just don't want to pay that for all the extra stuff, I wish they sold this just by itself. By itself, I think the tank is pretty good. I mean, it does everything a light tank needs to do. It's fast, it gets out there, it spots pretty damn well, it lights people up really fast. And this tank recently got buffed a few patches ago because it just wasn't performing that well. Um, and I'm glad that they did, because before this thing was doing about 220 or so damage per shot, even decked out the same way as this. I haven't changed anything since I first bought it, and it's definitely helped out to add that extra damage. Do I think it's worth the $40? Not really. Like I said, if you're going to buy any of the packages, you're going to have to buy the best one. Now, of course, I have the best one, the Operation Emperor, and this thing's $75. But there's a big reason for that, because you get a lot of tanks. You get the RDF light tank, you get the Typhoon 2, the Lav 15090, the Arty, the Abbott, and the Object 430. You get a lot of premium time, you get a lot of credits and gold, you get a title, you get bonuses to your credit and reputation for 2 weeks, but it's going to run you $75. If you're not going to buy that package, this isn't a terrible deal if you are looking to get this stuff. If you want the credits, you want the premium time, it's a great deal. If you're just doing it for the tank, I would just go and buy the VFM. You can buy it right in the dealer tree, and it pretty much does the same thing the RDF does, just plays slightly different due to the size and the armor versus the gun handling. Talk about the commander and crew. Now, this is a light tank, and I've gone ahead, and even though this is a premium, I usually use Maximilian. I know a lot of people probably don't have Maximilian. Sabrina Washington is an excellent light tank commander. She increases your vision range, improves the aim speed, improves your camouflage. She's just an all-around good light tank commander. I don't have both my skills on this tank. I don't play the RDF nearly as much as my VFM, just because there are certain things about the RDF that I just don't like about the playstyle. Because the Haul Traverse I mentioned is very, very slow, I took Spin to Win first instead of off-road driving. Obviously, once I get the second skill, off-road driving is going to be there, but because the Haul Traverse is so it's slow, and when you watch the replay later on, you'll see just how slow it is. It doesn't turn very well for the speed that it gets, and that's a problem, at least for me personally, is I like to be very maneuverable. If I'm rushing towards an enemy position, I like to be able to swerve left and right and throw off their shots in the hopes that I don't take any damage while moving towards them or running away from them. Anyway, that is what I took first. You could take off-road driving. I would definitely say that if you're going to do anything, take off-road driving and Spin to Win as your 2 driver skills. For your gunner, I took Quick Draw. The aim speed on this tank base is already pretty good. You could take Marksman instead to increase your accuracy when it's smallest, or you could take Shoot from the Hip when it's as big as it can get to improve your on-the-move accuracy. If you're going to do that, though, you might want to take Smooth Ride to go along with Shoot from the Hip. If you're going to do a lot of moving shots, you want to get your accuracy as low as it can be while you're moving. But for me, I went ahead and took the aim speed just because this tank cannot sit out in the open for very long, or you just risk getting the crap shot out of you. So I like to pop up, take a quick shot or 2, and back off and get back into cover. That's personal preference, so you'll have to decide for yourself. It does get high velocity, armor piercing, and heat. As I said, since this is a tier 6 tank and you're going to run into tier 8s and potentially tier 9s depending on your matchmaker, I take a lot more armor piercing than the heat, just because there's a lot more tanks that heat will just not do anything, and so I'd rather do damage pretty much guaranteed every shot, especially with the accuracy, than to risk shooting the wrong place at the wrong time with heat and doing absolutely nothing. You could take all armor piercing. If you like take more heat, that's personal preference. You can do that too. Consumables, as usual, I take spare parts, the energy drink, and the medical kit. You might switch out, these are the premium versions, you might switch out those with a normal repair kit and first aid kit. You might switch out the energy drink for the protein bar, or take the fire extinguishers. I almost never take the fire extinguishers. Later on in future patches, that might change. They're thinking about making it much easier to catch tanks on fire, and so that might become an issue later on. Since I do a lot of PvE, and if you do a lot of PvE, I definitely take the low, mid, or high tier field maintenance kits. It restores 20% of your vehicle's health and gives you back all of your ammunition. Now, even though this thing can hold 54 rounds, because of how fast it fires, and if you're lined up in a place, especially in PvE, where you can just keep that gun sailing shells towards the enemy every time it reloads, you're definitely going to run out of ammunition. And it doesn't even have to be a long map. You're definitely going to run out of ammunition on a long map for sure. You definitely want to make sure that you take your field maintenance kit so you can reload. Otherwise, you're reduced to pretty much just scouting. And even though that's useful in some of the PvE maps, a lot of people don't really scout. They just sort of snipe and let the heavy tanks roll up and scout, be the scouts in PvE. So definitely, if you're going to PvE, the 12,000 credits, it's definitely worth it. Retrofits. I take Chrome Barrel because I want more damage on this thing. A light tank, to me, especially that one as rapid firing as this, needs as much damage as it can get. The gun handling is already really good, but it does really bad damage without a Chrome Barrel. And the second of my retrofits, the experimental propellant, which is amazing. I think this should be on everybody's tank, and if you can get the Mark III version, you definitely want to do it because 7.5% damage is just too good to pass up. The intercom systems, now this is, the first two are, as you can see down here, they're universal slots. You can put whatever you want in there. This is, however, a technology slot. You could take any of these. I take the intercom systems because I want my crew skills to be improved just a little bit better, get the whole traverse speed a little bit better, the aim time a little bit better, all your crew skills improved. Right now for me, 6.25%. It will be 7.5% later once I've fully upgraded the Challenger 1. This is all personal preference. You can take what you have unlocked or work towards unlocking others so that you can put in these slots. There are no really bad choices, but I would definitely try to get this tank shooting as hard as it can because you can really start racking up the damage with just how fast this thing fires. Like I said, think of it as the American light tank version of the German E-25's tank destroyer from World of Tanks, and that's kind of what this is. It's a zippy little machine with kind of bad hull traverse, but it does a heck of a lot of damage. If you don't pay attention to it, you're going to pay the price. And that is the RDF light tank. And if you want to see just how fast this thing does fire, how fast you can wreck things, stick around. I've got a replay for you, and I'll see you on the battlefield. And here we are on Operation Tsunami. This is a slightly older replay. I think I ended up recording this about a day before patch 1.2 went in, and so the enemy spawns are not quite in the same place as they are now with the update to the enemy spawns and the map. But it really doesn't affect the tank itself that much. I also don't have the camouflage, obviously, since this is a slightly older replay. Now you can see that I'm playing more or less a sniper, especially at the beginning, because I've played this map enough so I know kind of where the enemies are going to come from, and I definitely don't want to be out in the middle of nowhere with no cover in a light tank that doesn't have the alpha to really take out enemies before I take at least 2 or 3 hits in return. So I'm just letting the T-72As go out and kind of be the buffer zone. I did get spotted, however, because you can see on the minimap my view range is good, but it's not super great. I also just went ahead and switched over to the heat because looking at the enemies that are coming at us, it's basically a bunch of light tanks and people that don't have a lot of ERA, so I might as well get as much damage as I can per shot, and the heat ammo definitely helps with that, so I just went ahead and swapped over. The rapid fire on the gun with the quick reload time allows me to just switch it anyway, so no big loss of DPM. The boss pulls up, I take a couple of shots, of course I just only hit him in the tracks, and since tracks are more or less spaced armor, heat doesn't like it, so it just did a little damage to his tracks. I decided to go ahead and push up, and it was the wrong time to do that because over the hill comes an expeditionary tank, another tier 6 light tank that has a very powerful gun, and as you see, it just took a quarter of my health in one shot. We got a warrior coming up, that's an autocannon, and the last thing that I want is to draw enough of his attention to get him shooting at me, which I did when I actually shot him. And like an idiot, I didn't aim very well there, so I ended up hitting the dead tank's gun. And if you saw just a second ago, I ended up taking another hit from that expeditionary tank, putting me quite low on health, and I ended up having to use my repair kit to get some of my life back. It's my friend the Weasel over there, and my shell velocity with the heat rounds isn't quite good enough, so I ended up just doing critical track damage and nothing else. We got a Bradley. Now, the Bradley does have ERA on his hull, so where I'm aiming basically on the front of his turret doesn't have any anti-heat armor, so you can see that my last few shots, when I went ahead and took the time to aim them correctly, went in. And now we've cleared out all of those tanks. I decided to do a little bit of spotting, because usually there would be tanks sitting way back there on like the 5 line just waiting to come out. And so I wasn't really interested in pushing around and over this hill too quickly. But at this point we haven't lost anybody. Everyone's on semi-okay health. And T-72A is kind of overpowered. We've got an expeditionary tank on our team as well as a VFM-5. So it's a light tank bonanza on this replay. And so I just decided, well, I'm not going to have to worry about not having anyone that's fast enough or with a good enough gun to keep up. So I push forward, find the Bagel Panzer. This is also an autocannon. He's got 8 shots. I try to do a little side scraping, which is pointless in a light tank that has no armor. And I ended up taking a couple of hits from him to take him out. Now I've only got 457 health left, and that's almost a one-shot with almost any tank that might spawn. So I decided to start playing a little bit safer at this point and not be the head spear that's pushing. I know that they were going to run into somebody there down at the cap, and it ends up being an MBT-70. He's doing a pretty good job of avoiding me here by just backing up and then going forward and staying behind some cover. But because this rapid fire gun, I decided just to blow the cover away so I could get maybe a good shot at him, or at least open up so my teammates could get a few shots at him. I had a good idea there to shoot right there, but the shell dipped a little lower, so I aim a little bit higher on the second one and get it through and then finish him off. So as you can see, the DPM on this thing is pretty good. I mean, the rapid fire gun with the accuracy lets you pull off some pretty good shots. Now on this old version of the map, stuff did spawn back here, so I go ahead and move back because I see they're getting ready to hit the spawns, and when they hit the spawn, stuff is going to start spawning over here. So I rush back here to at least get a couple of shots into the ass end of a few tanks that would have spawned. And there it is. The T-72, and now he's turned sideways trying to shoot at me. He's still aiming at me. I took a big risk actually pulling out in front of him when he was aiming at me. But he also got hit by my teammates down at the other end in the south because he turned his side right into them. I thought I could squeeze through there. Unfortunately, no. I shot the T-72's dead carcass just to show how angry I was. But now it's just a mad dash. If there's anything else that's going to spawn out in the field, I wanted to get out there and get a little bit more damage. I actually ended up getting pretty lucky right there with a shot on the move. And just trying to close the distance, a lock on, finish him off. But actually, I thought I finished him off. It was the VFM-5 that finished him off. Like I said, the VFM-5 I've done a review on. You can tell that it's a very good tank, and its own rate of fire is pretty good, and it does a lot more damage than this tank. Do another little quick fire on the move in hopes that I might get really lucky with the RNG and maybe hit the top of his tank. Fired again. Didn't do any damage. The Stingrays have very troll armor. But again, the VFM-5 saves my ass by taking him out because he rounded up on the top of the hill trying to get to me and got blown away. And at this point, since somebody had already went out and killed the 2 artillery that used to spawn on the 0 line, we're pretty much down to just capping. And as you can see, the top speed is pretty good in this tank, but the whole traverse, obviously, like I mentioned before, is a little bit slow. It does get up and scoot, but it just feels like the ground resistance is a little bad on this tank, and I'm not sure if that's a true thing or not, but comparing this to the VFM-5, it just seems like this small of a tank should be a lot more maneuverable than I think that it is. And this is after they'd already buffed it, So what you see is kind of what you're going to get even after patch 0.12. And that was a good game. We ended up losing somebody. I'm not sure what happened. Maybe he just got unlucky with the RNG. But we made almost 5,000 reputation, almost 71,000 credits. Not bad for a tier 6 light tank. I ended up doing the most damage at 7,100. And of course I didn't mitigate a single freaking thing because I don't have any armor. And as, again, I wanted to mention that if you really like the light tank play style, and you gotta have every tank in the game, you could splurge a little, on pay the $40, go and buy the lightning package and have fun with this tank. Otherwise, I would seriously suggest you save the $40 and just get the $20 worth of gold that you need to buy the VFM5. I think pound for pound, they're both very similar. They both have obvious advantages, and they both have slight disadvantages and differences between them. The RDF has a much faster rate of fire, a little bit higher DPM, a little bit less damage per shot, and it's a very overall smaller package, so it's harder to hit if it starts getting under fire. But the VFM5, overall, it has the armor to be very trollish, even against tier 8 guns. You can't rely on it 100%, but it gives you a little bit of a cushion there. It also has more health, it has smoke grenades. Overall, they're very similar, but I don't think that the RDF light tank is worth the $40 unless you want to get everything else that is included in the lightning package, like the extra gold and the credits. I don't think this is a bad tank. I just think that it's outshined a little bit by the other light tanks that are in the game, like the Expeditionary tank and the VFM5, and even normal light tanks in the tree. But if you like that style of tank, more power to you. You're welcome to give it a shot and try it out and see what you think. And that is going to do it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope that I was able to point out some stuff and make it apparent of whether or not you should get this tank or not. If you liked the video, please press the like button down below. It really helps out the channel. And if you haven't subscribed, you can click down at the bottom of your screen right now and click that, and you'll get all the updates every time that I upload a new video on Armored Warfare or some of the other games that I'll be getting into later. I hope you enjoyed the video, everyone. Take care, and I'll talk to you next time.